Bava Metzia, Daf Lamed Aleph. We begin from the two dots, several lines through the daf. The Gemara is learning our most recent Mishnah. The Gemara will first discuss contradiction and the implications of our first line. And then we'll get into the concept of the phrase Hashef Teshivim and other repetitive phrases we have all throughout Shas. The Gemara is going to discuss many of them, what they mean, why they are repetitive phrases, and what we're meant to say drushes from them. So first of all, the Gemara notes that in our way of defining what is a lost object, we seem to have identified the two extremes and missed the middle cases. So we spoke about that in an animal, let's say a cow or a donkey that is grazing on the side of the road, that is not lost, it's left there on purpose, and if it is running through the vineyards, that is lost. Says the Gemara, there's two separate factors here: grazing versus running, and on the side of the road versus in the vineyard. Something running is much more likely to be lost because animals that run tend to travel far from where they belong, and the owner doesn't know where they are. As opposed to something which is just grazing, is not implying that it's not where the owner left it. Now, also, animals are often on the side of the road, but not in vineyards, because they ruin vineyards, they ruin the grapes, and they get scratched up themselves. So there's two indications, there's two factors in each of these. We said if you have both positive factors, grazing and on the side of the road, it's not lost. If it has both negative factors, running and in the vineyards, then it is lost. The question is, what about if it's in between, or what if it's one of each? What if it's grazing but it's in the vineyards, or if it's walking in the vineyards, or if it is running but it's on the side of the road? So you have contradicting implications as to what the halacha be in that case. It is a stira. What is the answer? So the Gemara brings two approaches. Abaye says no, it's something called yaget olavreo. The main factor is the only one thing: is it grazing or is it running? And we discussed grazing wherever it is on this. If it's on the road, if it's in the vineyard, it's not the point. We said on the road you could apply that also as well if it's in the vineyard. That's not lost. And then we discussed running. Running is a problem, and therefore it doesn't matter where it is. We said in the vineyard, but the same is true if it's on the side of the road. That is Abaye's approach. Rava says that can't be correct, because then we should have said it in the place where it's the bigger chiddush. We wanted to say grazing is not lost. We should have said grazing even in the vineyards, where it could get scratched up and ruin the vineyard, and it's likely that the owner doesn't know it's there, or he'd remove it. It's still considered not lost. And if we wanted to talk about running, which is not lost, we should have said even though it's on the side of the road, where it's a common place for it to be, since it is running, it's lost anyway. So therefore, Rava wants to give a different answer. Rava says that you're right, we have contradictory implications on both of these cases, which means we have a stira on both of them. And it's not a contradiction because there's possible other factors that would split the din in each of them. So let's say running on the side of the road. So that would depend which way it's running. If it's running away from the establishment, if it's running to a place where it's ownerless, that means that it probably got away and the owner doesn't know where it is. So there it would be lost, and that's why we have an implication from one of the cases that it is an Aveda. If it's running towards the farms, towards the civilization, then it's heading home, so it's not lost. And that would be the case where we had an implication that it is not lost. Now, as far as the case of in the vineyards, where we had a contradiction as to whether if it is walking in the vineyards, is that considered to be lost or not? So it would depend on, are you talking about the vineyard as being an object that's quote-unquote lost, meaning it's being destroyed and you need to save it for the sake of the owner of the vineyard? Or are we talking about the cow that's being lost? The cow itself is lost. So as far as the vineyards are concerned, it is being lost. Even though the animal's not running through the vineyard, he's going to cause damage to the vineyard, so you should go save the vineyards for the guy. And in a case where you're discussing the cow itself, is the cow lost? So you don't have to do anything about it, because if it's walking in the vineyards, it's not going to get scratched up, it's not going to get injured, and therefore there's no reason to believe the owner doesn't know that it's there, and there's no reason to believe that it's lost. So Gemara asks, but how can you have such a case? It's still that you still have to do something about the animal. You still have to get it out of there because of the vineyards. So there's no nafkamina, which, how can we talk about one and not the other? Both apply in the circumstance. So not necessarily. If the vineyard belongs to a nachri or a kusi, then you don't have to worry about the vineyard. You just have to worry about the owner of the cow. And the cow is not lost, and therefore there's no issue. Gemara says, yeah, it is, because the kusi is going to shoot the cow. He's going to kill the cow in order to save his vineyard, because you told me that the vineyard is an issue. So the Gemara says, okay, so we're talking about a place where the local custom is you don't just shoot first and ask questions later. First, you issue warnings, and therefore he's not just going to kill the cow, he's going to warn the owner. Someone says, well, maybe the owner was already warned. Maybe how do you know that the owner hasn't been warned already? And therefore, this cow, if you don't save it, is going to get shot. So my answer is, if the cow was already warned and the owner is still allowing it to get lost in the vineyards, then it's what's called Aveda Midas. He's destroying it himself, and there's no obligation for you to return it. Okay, moving on to the next sugya, where it said that if you return an animal and it escapes, and you have to return it again, and as many times as it happens, you have to return it. We learned that from Hashev to Shivim. Now, the Gemara is going to discuss a number of times where the psukim use a double lashon. We'll have Hashev to Shivim, Hakim Takum, Shalech to Shalach, Azev Tazev, and many, many other such examples. And what does it mean? And is it meant to be a limitation of numbers? So the Gemara first discusses Hashev to Shivim, which we had here. So the Gemara says that there was one of the Rabbanan said to Rava, why do you say Hashev to Shivim implies any number of times? Hashev to Shivim sounds like twice. Once Hashem, twice to Shivim, 2 times. Maybe we should make a judgment from here. You have to return it twice, and afterwards you don't need to worry about it. The Rebbe said it's not how the drasha works. Really, Hashev to Shivim doesn't teach you a number. The word Hashev itself teaches you even 100 times. Hashev means return it and make sure it's returned no matter how many times it takes. To Shivim is to teach something else. To Shivim is to teach you can return it to the owner's property, to his house, to his garden, to his broken house out in the yard, and you don't have to return it to his physical possession. That's learned from Teshivim. Asks the Gemara, what's the case? If it's something which is properly protected, it's not going to escape again, so for sure you could return it to him, why not? And if it's something which is not properly protected, why should you not have to let the owner know that it's back? It's just going to walk away again. So the Gemara says, the Chiddush is that you could return it to a place where it's properly protected, but the Chiddush is you don't have to inform the owner that it's returned so that he has it on his radar that he needs to take care of it, as opposed to other types of returning for other reasons where you do have to. Like Rabbi Lazar says, every type of returning, whether you're returning a borrowed object, a rented object, a stolen object, any other type of pikadon, any of these things, you return it to the original owner, you have to inform him, I've returned it, it's out in the yard, it's your responsibility now, and if you don't, it's still your responsibility. You haven't transferred responsibility until you've informed the owner that it's back so that he knows that it's his responsibility. However, returning lost object, you don't have to, and that's because the special Xeris HaKasav, where the Torah included many different types of returning to make it easier for you, and that's this pasuk the Gemara is saying now of Hashev to Shivim. Okay, next the Gemara goes to Shalach to Shalach. We have a mitzvah of Shiluach HaKain, where you see a mother bird with chicks or eggs. You can't take the chicks or the eggs. You have to, when the mother's there, you can't take the mother either. You have to send the mother away, and then you can take the chicks and the eggs. So the Gemara asks, what if the mother comes back? You leave the eggs, you leave the chicks, the mother returns. We've seen elsewhere in school, and you have to send it away again and again as many times that it is. So the Gemara asks the same question. Maybe Shalach to Shalach is just to say twice, once Shalach, once to Shalach, and not more than that. So the Gemara gives the same answer. In other words, Shalach itself is any number of times, even 100. To Shalach is to teach me something else, to teach me that you not only have to send the mother away if you want to take the eggs for your own use, even if you want to take the babies, or even if you want to take the mother for a carbon, for a mitzvah, like the Tziparim of Mitzayra, you can't take the babies while the mother's there. You can't take the mother. You have to send the mother away. Now, says the Gemara, one of the Rabbanan said to Rava, I have a kasha on that from the pasuk of Hocheach Tochiach. The Torah says you should rebuke someone who's doing something wrong. Hocheach Tochiach, what's that? So there also we learn that any number of times you still need to rebuke him. Why don't you just say Hocheach is once, Tochiach is twice? You have to rebuke him twice and not more. He said no, same answer. Hocheach itself is even numerous times, even 100 times. Tochiach is to teach me not only does a Talmud rebuke his student, but even a student rebukes his Talmud. Even a student rebukes his teacher, his Rebbe, if he sees him doing something wrong. Going further, we have the pasuk of Azev Tazev. There's a mitzvah of Parika to help somebody unload his animal who's struggling under the burden that he's carrying. So how do you know? What is the extra Tazev for? Azev Tazev, what's the repeated word for? That's to teach how do you know that you're supposed to help even if the owner is not actually helping you, if you're just saying you do it. So that's Azev Tazev. In all circumstances, you have to help. Now, as far as helping someone load, there it says Hakim. Says Gemara, same drasha. If I only had Hakim, I would think you only have to help if the owner is around and he's at least doing some work himself. If he goes off on his own, Harino, you still have to help because it says hakim takim, and that's a repetitive word there. Asks Gemara, why do you have to teach me the parsha of loading and unloading, or at least this halacha? Why do you have to say it twice, both by loading and by unloading? Says Gemara Chiddush by each of them. If you would have only said it by unloading, I would think because there the animal is suffering, so you're helping the animal by unloading, so it's arbali chayim. However, in the case of loading, where you're not relieving the animal of any stress, therefore you wouldn't have to. And the reverse, if it would have only said it by loading, I would have thought that's because there you get paid, so that's why you have to help. However, in the case of unloading where you don't get paid, you don't have to help. At least you don't have to help if the owner's not involved. It says, what about Reb Shimon, who says that you don't get paid for loading either, so there's no difference then? So says, according to Reb Shimon, the reason you have to say both is because the Torah didn't specify which is which. It says, Azav Tazav and Hakim Takim. We don't know which one's talking about loading, which one's talking about unloading. I would have only said the bigger Chiddush. I would have only said the lesser Chiddush, Kamashmalan, twice, so that I know that in both circumstances you have to. Now the Gemara wants to know, why does the Torah have to tell me about loading, unloading, and a lost object? If you just say one, then it means you have to help a person with his property, so I would think no the other. So why do you have to say the two of them? So the Gemara answers, if you would have only said loading and unloading, I would think because they are not only helping the master, you're also helping the animal, because the animal itself is struggling. But in the case where it's lost, the animal doesn't care, so you're not helping the animal. I would think maybe there's no mitzvah. No, there's a mitzvah there as well. And if you would have only said the case of the lost object, that's because the owner is not there, the owner is not involved. But in case of the two where the owner is there, I would think you not have to. Kamash Malan. Okay, moving on to the rest of the list of places where the Torah uses a repeated word. What do we learn from the extra word? So it says, Maisimas, discussing someone who killed by accident, and the redeemer of the blood, the relative, the Goyal Adam, is allowed to kill him if he finds him outside of the Ori Miklat. So therefore, it says, over there it says Mois Yumas. What is the extra Yumas for? So that's to teach that you do not have to use the Misa who would be chayav if he was guilty of murder. So for this accidental killing, you don't have to give him that specific misa if you can't. What would be an example? Rashi says he was on a ship and he was running away from you, and you could shoot him with an arrow, and you could drown him perhaps, but you couldn't give him the misa that he deserves, which is misa b'sayif. Now, says the Gemara next, it says Hake Taka, discussing Irani Dachas, we have to destroy the entire city and kill everyone in it. So Hake Taka is to hit them. What's a repeated word for? That's to teach the same thing. You don't have to use a specific type of misa which is mentioned there. You could use any type if it is necessary. Next, in the Torah's mitzvah of returning a mashkan you take from someone who owes you money, it says to return it to him when he needs it. If it's a night clothing, return it at night. If it's a day garment, use it during the day. There you have two psukim and two repeated words. It says hashiv tashiv and it says chavel tachbol. So the extra word, the Gemara says, is to teach not only if you were given the mashkan by Vezdin, that you complain to the bezin that he owes him the money and he's refusing to pay, or he's not able to pay, and the bezin goes and takes a mashkan, that you have to return it. Even if you took the mashkan on your own, you marched into the guy's house and it took it by force, you do have to return it anyway when he needs it. Why do you need to have the two psukim of hashiv tashiv and chavel tachbol? That's to teach for the night garment, and for the day garment you have the same halacha. Next, in giving tzedakah, it says paseach tiftach, you should open your hand to him. It says Gemara, that's to teach not only the poor people of your city, but even the poor people of another city. When your eved leave, so it also over there it says nasayin etitain, you should give him a gift. That's referring to when your eved departs your house. So that's to teach not only should you give him a large gift if you can, but even if all you can afford is to give him a small gift, give that anyway. Also this is hanik tanik, to give a hanaka, to give an extra gift with an eved when he departs. That's to teach not only if your house was blessed because of him, you should give him a gift, even if your house was not blessed too much because of him, you should give him a gift anyway. What about according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who holds that it's only if your house was blessed, you have to give him a gift? What's the repeated word for? That's just a stylistic format, that's what people talk. Next, the Gemara says, Have tavitenu, again referring to the mitzvah of tzedakah. What's that for? So that's not only should you give someone who does not have money at all and he doesn't want the gift, you should give him a loan if he needs it. But even someone who could afford it and doesn't want to use up his own money, you should give him tzedakah in the form of a loan, and then you could collect from his estate after he dies. Says Gemara, what about according to Rabbi Shimon, who says you should not to do that, you're not chayav to do that? So then it's just an expression. Okay, now ending off the daf, the Gemara refers back to the Mishnah. We had said that the person who's returning a lost object gets paid for his time. The Gemara here says he doesn't get paid for what he would have earned. If he has a high-paying job, he's not going to get that. He's not going to get that full salary. He gets paid like a worker who's not working. So what does that mean, like a worker who's not working? The Gemara means, how much would he be willing to take in order to leave his job? That means if someone has a job where he's working very hard, he's being paid a very high salary, he's not going to just quit the job and get nothing. He needs to earn. However, he doesn't want to work so hard. So a certain amount of money he'd be willing to accept in order to not have to work so hard, so that at least he'll be making this amount and then he'll be able to take time off. So that's how much you have to pay him, the amount that he'd be willing to accept to not have to do that hard work any longer. Well, gents, end off to the Mishnah on the next daf. The Gemara says an incident that happened with Isser and Rav Safra. They went in to business together. They purchased merchandise, and Rav Safra decided to divide up the merchandise that they had bought. They had not made the division yet, and he took his half. I guess he sold it. Now, when he split the merchandise, so his partner Isser was not there. In order to make sure that it was a fair split, so Rav Safra took two witnesses to watch as he split it, that it was done evenly. Now Isser was not pleased, and therefore he complained to Rabbi Bar Rav Huna. So Rabbi Bar Rav Huna brought in Rav Safra, and he said, "Bring me the proof that you did it in front of a beis din." He said it wasn't enough. 2 people, you need to have 3 people. He said, either bring me all 3, bring me 2 out of the 3 who will say that there were 3, or bring me witnesses that will say that there were 3. Now, there weren't 3. There were only 2. So Rav Safra said, where do you get this halacha that you need to have a beis din? So he said, it's simple. I learned it out from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said that if the person who's returning the lost object is refusing to do it unless he gets paid full value, he has to make a tanai in front of a beis din. That shows that in order to take money away from one person and give it to someone else, you need to have a beis din. So here also, you're taking things which were in a partnership, and you're taking part of it for yourself. You need to have a beis din for that. So Rav Safra said, this is very different. I'm zeicha to half of it. I'm taking my half. All you need to do is make sure that it's done fairly. 2 people is enough to testify that the actual splitting was done evenly and that I took an even half. You're not taking property from one person and giving it to someone else. Over there, you're taking the money from the person who lost the object and you're awarding it to the returner. For that, you need a beis din. He said, I'll bring you a proof. The halacha is that an almana is dividing up the dead husband's property in order to take her food supply. She only has to do it in front of 2 people. So you see that it's 2, and you don't need more than that. They just have to check to make sure that she does a fair sale and she does everything correctly. You don't need a court for that. So the Gemara says on that, Abaye said that Rav Yosef bar Yumi said she doesn't require a beis din. It means she doesn't require a beis din of professionals. She doesn't require expert mumchin. But it's not enough to have just 2 people. You need to have at least 3 people. So that was his shita there.